Sure. Good morning and welcome again to the Fracas, the mortgage report and the real estate report. No holds barred, no punches pulled. Here with our distinguished guest, Mark McWilliams again. And Mark, we've had a lot happen since you and I were last in this room. And it was almost 3 weeks ago, a month ago.
Yeah, it was a month ago.
And you and I have both been industriously busy with helping our community both see homes and estimate, mortgage payments. And I think a lot of people are interested about what's occurred since you and I last sat down and talked and what is in store for us. The cool thing about Colorado Springs is it's indicative of the rest of the country except for your few pockets of cities that we won't mention right now. And you can draw conclusions on your own area if you're listening out of state from some of the things that are going on here, or at least comparatively analyze what's going on in Colorado Springs to where you may be as a listener. So let's start off here, Mark. What have you seen since you and I last sat down in the Colorado Springs marketplace? And then we're going to move on to some harder questions. We're going to talk a little bit about the meetings that Jerome Powell's had with the Senate and the House, and we're going to talk about why home ownership, even in this position, and some other things that our listeners may be interested in. So let's kick it off right there with Mark. Where's the market been since we last sat down?
Good. Thanks, Corey. So the market is doing its normal thing for the beginning of the year. We don't have enough inventory. We're sitting, as I looked at it Monday of this week here, 1,062 single-family homes in all of El Paso County. Now, that's a county of 1 million people and only 1,000 homes. Not enough. So, yes, you're going to talk a lot about rates, and I think we definitely love to talk about rates. It's important. It's a big part of home ownership. But what we're finding is, they dumped an ice bucket challenge on the entire market of housing by increasing rates, but it still doesn't change the fact that we don't have enough supply. So a lot of people think, and you'll hear the media and our newspapers and all of those putting out articles saying, oh my gosh, things are slow, things are terrible. Yeah, but prices aren't falling because there's not enough supply.
So this is one of the drums that you've been beating, Mark, for the past 2 years. This is your Nostra Williams moment.
There you go.
Where you've been saying this, and kind of people have been like, oh, yeah, whatever. Oh, inventory problem, And when we last sat down, you, I love it, no punches pulled. You went after the chief editor of the Gazette.
Yeah.
For publishing an article that says, Colorado Springs housing market tanks.
Yeah.
Sunday.
That was 2008. And we're starting up the same mantra again. Here we are. Yes, could things radically alter? Yes, it's possible. But as it stands, yes, we're seeing a slowdown. And they're trying to make the slowdown catastrophic.
Yep.
Slowdowns aren't catastrophic. They're fantastic. What we had before was ludicrous speed. Now we're getting back to normal. Instead of going on to plaid, we're going to pull it back. And we're going to get it's Tesla and Spaceballs both, but
right.
Yeah, but you got to know you cannot maintain what we were doing before.
Yep.
It was not healthy. It was not good all the way around. So just because we're going from ludicrous speed back down to at least a standard flight, that doesn't make it a bad thing, and it's not something we all need to be afraid of. What we need to do is find homes, live in homes, own property, own land. That is a staple of our economy. And it shouldn't be insane, and it shouldn't be like it was in 2008, 9, 10, which I can make all kinds of references and give data on 2008, 9, 10, how manufactured that was, but we won't go there today.
Well, Mark, this show is supposed to be combative, and unfortunately, I could not agree with you more about. You called it a staple. I would even go further and say it's a bulwark of our economy, our way of life, our standard of living in this country.
Right.
To own a house.
Well, and at the same time, we've got articles being put out in magazines, predominantly on the East Coast right now, but articles speaking to the millennials saying, owning a home is bad. Owning a home makes you grumpy. Owning a home makes you, when you're grumpy, you're a bad person. I can't even fathom that being said. Even that way, it's so manipulative. And to make it that way of a statement, to make you feel guilty for owning a home, that has to have an ulterior motive. How is that a benefit? And you've got the World Economic Forum putting out on their website, in all their publications, you'll own nothing and be happy. How does that make people happy? How is that the case? It sounds to me more of, you're more easily controlled if you're a tenant. Now, I'm not speaking against tenants. There's times to be a tenant. There are times to rent a home or rent an apartment. There's times for it.
Yep.
But we want to move out of that because that's what builds long-term wealth, and with long-term wealth comes strength. And that's where we need to be as a people.
You know, Mark, I'm going to beat on this drum with you in the background because I think you just really strided into a very important point. And let's roll this New York Times reporter in the parking lot together, this being the parking lot.
All right, let's do it.
You know, you and I actually talked about this. A year and a half ago, a piece came out of the New York Times telling people that it's better to rent than own their property. And you and I were flabbergasted. I mean, you can probably hear the heartbeat raising in the tempo of our voice and our breath of how angry this makes us. And this is why, because there's a purchasing thing going on here where that editor from the New York Times or the journalist or whoever they want to claim they are, sort of title, is owned by either BlackRock or Vanguard or State Street or one of these companies that wants to gobble up property to pursue the removal of the dream of American homeownership. I'm going to say it right now, people. They've said this publicly, Mark, that they've been working on acquiring huge parts of single-family residences because you shall own nothing and you shall be happy and eat bugs. And so this is really, we saw this happen with different subsidiaries of BlackRock, and we saw it happen with Zillow, and we saw it happen with other large investors who are trying to hide themselves under DBAs or different things. And you have this disgustingly pablum regurgitated lie that it's better to rent than it is to own. And, let's attack that right now. I'm going to let you continue.
Okay.
Because I think you were really in stride after I cut you off.
No, you didn't cut me off, because that's very important to call out, that if there's people, organizations that stand to make money. Now, yes, you and I stand to make money when people buy homes.
Right.
So I've got to call that out. We'll call us out. However, I don't perceive that we're making somewhere in the range of $100 billion or $1 trillion doing this.
Nope.
Like those corporations are.
Exactly.
We're performing a service. I would struggle to call that a service that they're performing when they're marketing and advertising to the general public that you need to come rent from us. We own all the homes. We own all the stuff. It just creates a weakness when someone else has the authority to change your entire world based upon their whim.
It exacerbates the inventory problem that you've been consistently bringing up. And
correct.
A great part of this is a real brief example to what Mark's talking about. I was in a certain island in Georgia, and I was in a bungalow next to another individual who worked for Zillow. She worked for Zillow Corporate Property Acquisition Management. And so I thought, Mark, what the hell is that?
Oh, yeah.
And she says, okay, well, my job, and she immediately recognized that I was in the industry, so we cut the bullshit and moved right to the meat, got the the fat off. And she says, we have sometimes 420 closings a day where we've contracted with a local builder to build 420 to 600 homes, single-family residences within the community, and then we come in and we buy every single one of them at a prearranged price.
I get their business model. I do. I think they are expecting that there's going to be a major contraction and that people are going to choose to rent, and they want to keep them there. They want to keep them. They want to have the inventory. Good on them. But they want to keep them there, and they want to maintain control when they do so. So that means they can change your rent. They can up your rent. They can They can decide they're going to include your cable, phone, electric, gas. Oh, wait, gas is now an evil thing, too. So they're going to pull those back. This is the same group of people that are wanting to do that. And
get a government subsidy for your rent and raise your taxes?
Yes, they certainly can.
Huh.
How about that? And so it's going to squeeze, and we don't want to see that. We don't want to see that for the general public. Having a public that have a responsibility that comes with ownership, that have a drive to be successful, to succeed, to take care of something bigger than yourself, and not just be a minion that goes off to work each and every day, making money to pay the rent, making money for someone else. And we've talked about it before, and I think it's worth mentioning here right now. We've said it several times. If you are a homeowner over a 30-year period, and I'm going to include the last bit here of the last 2.5, 3 years, because that number that we see in a lot of statistics was 2019. Well, since 2019, most of us have gone up nearly $150,000 in their value of their home.
Yeah.
Exactly right. And so it was $300,000. Well, they have a net worth after 30 years of roughly $400,000 to $450,000 net worth.
And folks, Mark isn't pulling this example out of his butt. We talked about this last show where if you bought a house in 1993, which were very similar economic circumstances, we'd seen property values go up more than they were usually going up within the time period, and we saw interest rates at about 7%, right where they are right now.
I'll give you even better. Here we go. So my wife just last night found out that her childhood home is for sale in California. So
go on.
Right there in Sherman Oaks, and her grandparents bought that home in 1956 for $16,000. Then sold it to her parents several years later for $34,000. Now, that would have been right in that 1970 time period. They bought it for $34,000. That home right now is active on the market at $1.9 million.
That's math, people. And, I'm really happy we're kind of fixated on this because there's a word that I use that made Mark chuckle right before we got on the air. It's called time-opic. It's myopically looking at segments of time, the last 6 months, the last year, the next 6 months, the next year, and it's not seeing things how these major investors see them that are scooping up properties because they know, because of statistics and access and power to information, and obviously they're not under the sheepish control of the New York Times, Mark. They know that this inventory problem cannot be solved in 6 months to a year to 2 months. The builders simply cannot build enough property over a period of time to solve this in a short time span. So what are they doing? Instead of bonds, instead of equities, instead of those things, they're buying property. And folks, one of the best things I've been able to do for myself and my personal finances and investments is watch what J.P. Morgan Chase and Goldman Sachs are doing. Listen to the guys like Zoltan Pozar who, went off the rails a little bit, don't work for them anymore, and are now offering information that isn't bought by larger corporations, and then follow what those big corporations are doing. And that's where you're going to make your money.
They have a 5, 10, 20, 50-year plan. They're not just trying to make money for today. Yep. Yes, they are, but you got to know they have a long-term plan. So should we. So should we as the general public, owning homes, buying land, have investments that last. And they have it. We should be doing the same. Try your best. Yes, there are times we're all going to have tight times. We're all going to have times where we've got to rent versus buy or own. Make it as short as possible and get into ownership, because by having that, you have more control over your life.
I can't say this better. I mean, let's go on the theme of time-opic. And, Mark, take us back in time. Take us back in time, because you read historically more than almost any other person I know. You do that to get an ontological base and to understand where we are now. You got to go back in time. You do.
All right, how far? Where are we going?
Well, let's go back to the middle 1800s. Tell us the texture of home ownership in our country, and what's going on then?
So I'll even go back 100 years before that, mid-1700s, reading H.W. Brand's book on Benjamin Franklin. And he talks about owning a home for a time, renting, and then owning a home. You look at Poor Richard's Almanac, which was ghost-written. Basically, most of it was hidden and often stolen by Benjamin Franklin. He would pull articles from others and rewrite them and publish those, and he was known to do crazy things like that. And but he would talk about home ownership and land ownership. And keep in mind, these guys went on to build the framework of our Constitution. And in early days, if you wanted to vote, you had to have a stake in it, which means you had, and they thought through this, they wanted, and I know this has been twisted by all kinds of different things. Here was their core. What they wrote about was you need to own property and have something to lose by how you vote, so that you would vote ways that took care of your property, took care of the basic needs, because under all things is the land.
The age-old adage, you got to have skin in the game. Now, unfortunately, that's probably a slavery reference. We're talking about having land in the game, folks.
Correct. Exactly right. And it's been twisted, and I'm not going to speak to things that are twisted. I'm going to go with what they said and what they wrote.
Yep.
We want you to have that. Now, I understand why we changed that. I understand how that turned. I love our democratic principles that we have. But know that you will have less power when you are voting for your daily needs versus voting for your legacy needs.
Now, that language there is really important, because an interesting thing happened. We're not going to spend that long on what I'm about to say in this show, but we had CBDC be announced by the U.S. Treasury last week. And as we're moving closer to the eventual central bank digital currency that
there you
CBDC
go.
means,
There's our definition. Thank you.
you're going to see even a further deviation potentially from a gold standard, a further deviation from a fiat currency. Now, Mark and I have talked about whether or not we can have a plausible gold standard reestablished or some sort of a gold-tethered CBDC, which would be great because it legitimizes it past it being a prime solution for
Legitimize
an
it, but
math
it
problem.
stabilizes it as well.
It stabilizes it, and it also gives, like the petrodollar, it gives it something internationally to have a value tether to. So, we're hopeful for that, but hope is worth I don't know how many cents. It's not worth dollars, and what we could have happen is that you have a further dilution of the value of currency, and in that situation, Mark, how much more valuable does land and tangible asset become?
Tangible asset, well, like land. And it's one thing to own blue sky. It's one thing to own a hope, like you said. I think that's a great way of saying it. Having hope is beautiful, and it creates all things. We love that. Having land, having property, having ownership in something tangible gives you a power and a strength as a people. And when there's somebody that their stated objective is owning the world, or at least dominating it, I sure don't want to hand them what is my tangible strength.
No, sir. And everybody who's listening to us may not agree with us, but I'm going to say something really controversial, Mark.
Oh, good.
This is despite the interest rate. I'm saying purchase land and property despite the interest rate. And here's why. This is another mathematical principle.
All right.
You know what your effective APR is, your effective annual percentage rate on your mortgages the first year?
Go for it.
It's between 98 and 140%. That's your actual split on the ratio you pay between principal and interest and the money you've borrowed on a slope, an amortization table over 30 years. This is the dirty secrets you hear on this show that you do not hear anywhere else, because Mark and I, we've been doing this crap long enough that we know that helping people and giving them neutral information is better than convincing anybody to do anything. Because you know what? The guy returns the car that he doesn't want to buy. He bounces on the contract of the house that he doesn't feel right about, and he reneges on the financing that didn't end up being what he thought it was. And so what you hear on this show, guys, is the ugly truth. And when you're looking at renting a property at 100% interest rate, and you're going in and you're buying a property, and your effective APR is above 100%, who cares? This is going to be really controversial. On 3% in interest rate. Well, you say, Corey, your qualification, your debt to income ratio, your monthly payment, your budget.
All true.
Guys, that matters. It does matter.
Yep.
But that's the thing you should be worrying about.
All right, so do the real math. Average rent right now in Colorado Springs for an apartment or a small home.
Well, like 2-bedroom?
2-bedroom apartment is running $1,800 to $2,000
$2,000
a man. But let's go with a single family.
We didn't coordinate that, folks.
No, we didn't. So $2,500 a month. Let's take that as our average right now, which is a hair low on a single family, but let's start there.
That's like $400,000 at 6% interest rate FHA, PATIMI.
Yes, it is. That's $400,000 home. So let's go there. Let's look at how much is that a year? Well, it's $30,000. That's $30,000, and because we're going to have this, I can feel it coming. People say, I don't want to buy something because what if the market goes down?
Well, they're talking about rates or housing prices, because I can tell you right now, housing prices are not going to go down.
They are not. Absolutely agree.
Get out of your head, people.
But even if they have it in their head and they're holding on to it, $30,000 a year is what your rent is going into a bucket. Right. That's not yours. Even if your house goes down, you buy a $400,000 house, you're in it, and it goes down, say, which, by the way,
2% or something.
So let's go with what the average was across Colorado Springs during the crash. I'm talking 2008, 9, 10.
The worst case scenario, folks.
Worst case. That's where I'm going.
Yep.
Average right now in Colorado Springs that went down was 12%. Across the entire time period, not per year, across the entire time period of 6 years. So that's 2% a year.
See, the math like this is so important, because I'm thinking in my head, Mark, even being in the industry and being in love with the real data, I'm thinking, oh, it's 40%.
No.
It
didn't. Now, there were places in the country that it did drop 40%.
Right. Las Vegas and Alabama.
Florida, Alabama, California, Las Vegas, all that. Yeah. Detroit, because no one wanted to live there.
Yep.
And so,
still.
So what you've got, though, is you do that real math, even at 40% over a 7-year period, you still are only dropping a couple of percent, even at 5% a year. But if you're renting, you just gave up on a $400,000 home, you gave up $30,000 that you will not ever get back.
And also, the interest that you pay on your mortgage is deductible by your taxes, as well as whatever fees you racked up.
And rent is not.
And you have substantial benefit in worst case scenario.
Exactly.
To be owning a house.
So,
and I mean, if you're agonizing about that 3% mark, I mean, the difference between, let's say, 6% and 9% in interest rate, if affordability isn't an issue, and we want to address that because your personal finances and your budget are extremely important, but if affordability isn't an issue and you can still afford that payment, why are you agonizing over 3% when you're paying 100% in
Yeah, as a renter in that same 6-year period, right? 2008, 2007. Let's start there.
Pick up right where you left off.
Go right all the way up through 2012. If you had taken that same 6-year period and rent it at $2,500 a month, you would be out $180,000.
You would be out. $180K.
$180K. $180,000 gone.
So let's say you hit the market at the right point, Mark, and you'd said, okay, well, we don't want to buy in 2008 because the market's falling apart.
No, I'll do one better. So let's say you bought a home in 2006, top of the market last time.
Yep.
Top of the market. And you paid $300,000 for that home. And then it did dip, and it got all the way down to, let's go with it. Let's go worst case scenario. In our cases here in Colorado Springs, a $300,000 home over that time period dropped down to about $240,000. Worst case.
Yep.
Worst neighborhood, worst case, worst everything.
Yep.
What is it selling for today?
That's that time-opic thing, folks.
Exactly. That same home that dropped all the way down, call it $240,000, is now selling for $450,000, $500,000. Exactly. And that time period, we're talking, let's say, 16 years.
Yep.
In that time, you were making payments. In that time, you probably refinanced and got a better interest rate, and you're putting more towards your principal versus your interest. And now you have a home that you're sitting on, let's call it $250,000 inequity.
Mark, you've worked me up. All right, this
right.
is
Do the long-term math. You
this
start
isn't
at this-
arguable.
It's not. So that your point is exactly right.
Your point.
Think longer than 2 years. Think longer than 1 year. Think longer. Have a 15-year plan. Now, this is something I'm wanting to talk to a lot of folks about right now, is we've got so much doom and gloom, so much, oh my gosh, there's going to be a civil war. There's going to be this. There's going to be that. It's the end of the world. I've got a whole group of people that are telling me it's going to be the end of the world any minute.
World War III is going to
Hey, the world's still spinning, and I want to still plan, and I'm going to still keep moving forward, and everyone needs to have that mindset. If you have that mindset of the world's going to end at any time, you very quickly become a victim.
Correct. Like, for instance, they actually, a university in China actually said that our Earth's core stopped spinning. It's getting reversed, and that's been debunked. I mean, it was like a trillionth of a measurement unit that it had slowed down, actually. And, people actually think the Earth is not still spinning, Mark.
I've got people thinking the Earth is flat. Get on a plane and fly with me. Right. But the point is, you've got to see that the world is going to keep spinning. The world's going to keep moving. And I love the wise saying, if you found out the world was going to end tomorrow, what would you do today? Plant a tree. There's a wise man said that, and I love it because I'm going to have hope. I'm going to have plans. I'm going to keep moving forward. I'm going to have a long-term goal. And so that's what home ownership brings for all of us. Home ownership goes that direction every time of, hey, I'm going to own because I have a long-term plan.
And the texture of people's lifestyle and behavior change, folks.
Yep.
When you own that house. All of a sudden, there's joy in your work because the fruits of your labor are going into that thing, that tangible thing that's yours. It's not something in Decentraland from some, weirdo cryptocurrency. It's not a video game Lego kingdom. It's something that you actually wake up extra 2 hours on Saturday because you want to paint that part of your house, or you want to landscape that part of your backyard, because guess what? It's yours. You cannot underestimate how much this changes quality of life for individuals.
It does. And that's the focus. Look at every dystopian movie you've ever seen, every future you ever saw, every 1984. Lord, we can go through all of them.
They're all in projects.
All of them. Everybody lives in a project.
Yeah.
Everybody does.
Even the dystopian District 9 with the aliens. They lived in a project too. Jamaica or something.
It is. So we've got to have that attitude. And we don't want to live day to day.
Yeah.
Live for future. Put money away. Save money. Plan. That's where a strength of a people builds from.
Instead of talking about the hearings, the Senate and the House hearings that have been going on the last couple of days and what that means for interest rates, I'm going to invite Mark to talk about some strategy that he implements with his clients, both what he plans on doing in the next 6 months and what he's been doing as a matter of philosophy to guide people that would prospectively be buying a house in Colorado Springs with him, what guides them to a good decision and a good long-term investment. Because we've been talking about time OPIC.
Yes.
And I know that because of your breadth of experience, I think you've sold 2,000 houses in Colorado Springs.
Seems like it, doesn't it?
So a lot of people have come back to you after 5 years, and guess what? You've guided them to a decision that allows them to sell that property for a good value. So let's talk about how you got them there, and,
all right.
and what did you employ?
So the rules always remain the same, though you get more grace during certain times of the market. If the market is crazy like it was, there was lots of grace if you happen to have bought a home with one of my 3 strikes. Sometimes.
Well, first of all, let's
cover those.
The first thing, though, is can you ever steal a good house?
A great house?
Yeah. Can you ever get a great deal on a great house?
Okay.
Because you told me this 5 years ago, and I disagreed with you, and now it's like hardcore doxology.
It is. So, number one, you're right. You will never steal a great house. You're never going to get a great price as a buyer on a great house, because a great house that's been cared for, loved, in a great neighborhood, doesn't have major issues, doesn't have one of those three strikes that I'm going to talk about here in a minute, you're going to get a good price possibly. You may even pay a premium even in a down market. Having done this and gone through a couple of down markets, a great house is going to still get a really good price.
And Mark and I, real quick, have seen people come in with the expectation because of market environment and lose that great house,
Right.
thinking that they're going to get the deal of the century on it. And how many times have we seen folks walk away from an unbelievable property because $5 or $10,000?
Well, because they believe they should be able to steal it.
Yeah.
So if the rule still remains, if you think the house is phenomenal, you're not the only one that thinks that. So that's a credit to you. You got good taste. Most others do as well. But if there's work to be done in it, if there are issues to be done, be eyes wide open. Be eyes wide open and know that there are some issues with the home. And yes, you might possibly be able to steal the house or get a great price on the house. I used to give an award every year to who I felt stole a house. and because it was a good house that I said every time, you're going to make money on this because you're going to put in some sweat equity. You're going to put some effort into this home, and I can't wait to sell it for you because we're going to really rock. Now, let's go back to the 3 rules that we don't want to break, and especially not all 3 at once. First would be big power lines, high tension power lines. That's something we typically don't want to be within about 200 yards of. We really don't.
You know, there's that NBC cartoon, Larry the Lightning Bug. Don't go playing my power lines.
Yeah, but most folks have at least some apprehension about living there, so that's a strike against trying to sell it. Number 2 is a long, steep driveway, which here in Colorado can be a problem. You're going to end up walking up your steps to get to your house because you had to park your car down at the bottom of the hill before you could go up that. But yet, I still have homes that'll sell with it, but it's got to be a phenomenal home.
And those of you in California, Florida, and Texas who are buying a house with Mark in June, I know that it'll happen.
Yeah.
It gets different here during the winter.
It does.
You're going to want to have that thing heated, and then you're going to want to have the perpetually young neighbor, or maybe a neighbor with 4 boys,
Yes.
ranging from 4 years old to 16, who are going to be able to plow that with an ATV. Otherwise,
it's going to be a
it's
job.
miserable.
It is. But probably the most common mistake that I see folks do is they buy a house right up next to a very busy street, either backs up to it, sides up to it, and it's one of those that I will tell you that it typically happened when I'd get a call from a seller saying, "Hey, Mark, we didn't buy with you, but we really want to sell our home now, and we got such a good deal on it when we bought it directly from the builder, and it was the one that they said was the best house and the best lot." And I'm like, but it's not. It backs up to a major street. Why'd you buy that one? Well, we got a good deal on it. Well, be prepared to give back because now you're going to sell it, and it's going to be much more difficult to sell. Even in a crazy market, it takes a little more. But as the markets do change, that home will be much harder to sell if it has 1, 2, or all 3 of those strikes. Now,
So there's something really important here, folks. I hope you heard. Veteran insight means veteran advocacy. And when you're dealing with builders, it's really important that you have a veteran agent at your back representing your best interests because, as Mark just said, this builder said this is the best lot that we have to offer. If it's backing up to a 4-lane highway or road, that is not their best lot, and they're telling you that to be able to incentivize you to buy the house, and you need to have a weighed perspective from somebody like Mark who's sold 2,000 houses and can see that most of these streets have expanded to 6-lane, and then there goes the easement between your fence and the street.
all true. So you've got to know when you're wanting to buy a new home, which some people absolutely love to buy new homes. My wife's one of them. We love that. All good. That said, if you go stop at a builder and, they're showing you all their options and they say, hey, we've got this spec ready now, know that 90% of the time, if a builder built a spec, they built their specs on a B or C lot, which means a lesser lot, lesser opportunity by and large. They do that because they know they need to move it, and there's going to be people who have to have a house now, and here you go. Well, your motivation's different. But that's where having an agent helping you with this process and being able to speak on your behalf and encourage you, hey, let's wait an extra month or 2 and go get a better lot, because when you go to sell it, hey, that's going to be a premium. That's going to be a better lot, easier to sell, and it'll get more money than the one that backs up to the busy street, which was their C lot, and that's the way the builders move those lots. They have to.
So you mentioned something to me earlier, Mark, that you had a conversation with another agent, I think it was last week, about unique things that pop up regarding properties, pretty important stuff within certain areas. Talk to us about that a little bit.
Okay. Well, there are areas in every city where a good veteran agent's going to know, hey, this neighborhood either has a difficult time selling, therefore not as good of appreciation. Typically, there are soil differentiations throughout the city. You've got soils that may or may not be more expansive. People hear the word bentonite. Bentonite is nothing but clay. Well, clay does something special. When it gets wet, it expands. And when it expands, that's how you get expansive soils. That's how you get all that. And there are builders who know how to build on that. And there are homes that were built on expansive soils that have stood the test of time, no issue.
Are there builders that do not know how to build on that, Mark?
There definitely are. And I can sit and list off builders that I know had major issues and had to come back and completely repair the foundations of an entire neighborhood. Now, it's important that we, and that your agent, give you counsel on that, whether you're buying new or used. As a resale home, hey, there's certain neighborhoods we need to take an extra look at. We need to make sure that this house is sitting well, that it has stood the test of time where others haven't. So, yes, I was talking with this agent, and she called me up, and she goes, okay, let's off the top of her head list off neighborhoods that we know we need to take extra care in. Because she was going to teach a class to other agents and say, okay, if you're going to be selling a home in this neighborhood, and there were about 7 or 8 neighborhoods in our town that have that, and we as agents need to be able to talk about that and be able to give good counsel there. So it's what you get, and especially here in Colorado, in most situations, you have a buyer agent representing you. You're not paying for that. They're getting paid out of the MLS. So if someone else is paying for it, you want the very best representation you can get.
But, Mark, isn't all of this usually revealed in the sellers and properties disclosure?
Some sellers have no idea. I'm going to take the nice way of saying that. There are some sellers that just won't tell you. There are some sellers that have no idea what all's going on, and some of them said, well, I didn't care, so therefore you shouldn't care. Well, that's not a reality of life. So, and I will also tell you that a lot of that is dependent, especially when we're talking soils and erosion and expansion and contraction, and a lot of that is dependent on how wet of a year it is. So I've been in this town now for 35 plus years. There were years that I recall it rained every afternoon, and I mean a deluge every afternoon, and you could set your watch by it right around 3 o'clock. We got a big rainstorm. Well, that impacts that expansive soil, that issue there. And so if we have another one, another year or 2 years where we get a lot of rain, well, it's going to impact how your house performs with that, and it's going to bring to light issues that your builder may or may not have done. We had a 10-year drought. Pikes Peak Regional Building didn't have requirements that they have today during that 10-year drought because, doesn't rain that much. Well, it used to. Don't you think it's going to come back? Yeah. So these are all things. When you're buying a home, think long term, have good plans, have good strategy, have the home inspected. Always, always, always have the home inspected. But in those neighborhoods, you may find your dream home. All good. We're going to look at it closer. We're going to get into it and really look at it better. And in those particular neighborhoods, spend the extra $300 to $500 and have an engineer come look at the house. That's always a good plan as well.
So before we let you go, Mark, and only have a little bit more time here, last question is, have you run into situations where you have an overzealous house inspector, or even, I'm going to get risky here, and maybe it hasn't happened, but a foundation engineer or inspector who have come in and have over-embellished or exaggerated problems with properties that were not as much of an issue that they're making of them, or you saw value and repair because of your connections, and you were able to counsel the home buyer differently than those professionals?
I'm rarely going to trump a home inspector. I'm going to give background. I'm going to give more information. If a home inspector sees something that he's very, very concerned about, I'm going to go get an expert. Yes, there are times a home inspector looks at it and says, oh my gosh, this thing's horrible. This is terrible. All right, great. Let's go get an actual specialist. So a home
And
inspector.
you've got the McWilliams list, by the way, which is
Yeah.
people you've worked with for the last 20 years that are bona fide to do what they've been asked to do. They're
All
trustworthy.
true, all true. But most importantly is your home inspector is a generalist. He's a general practitioner. He is your first look at the general issues of a home. He's going to go through a list of about 300 items. He's going to come up with things that he wants looked at. And most good inspectors are going to say, hey, recommend having a specialist look at this because they are experts in that field. I'm just calling it out. I'm calling out that this needs to have somebody who is really good at furnaces come look at this. So I typically, that's going to be how my inspector rolls. Every now and then the one I see probably most often is I've had inspectors that want to be plumbers and want to go and do a sewer scope drain.
But they're not qualified.
Some of them are, some of them are not. But I will tell you that I have had, that is kind of the one where, oh my gosh, this has got a crack in it. You're going to have a sewer backup. You're going to have a problem. When, if it's roots, yeah, we need to have it roto-rooted out. We need to have it cleaned out. But if they're calling it a crack or a major problem there, I will tell you that probably 75% of the time when I have an expert look at it, it really wasn't a major issue at all. Not even close.
Are you telling me that some guy that wanted to make money off of an exorbitant repair of a clay pipe was overestimating the cost?
Well, that's the thing. So sometimes it's a home inspector that does that, but he's not going to make money. He's not going to do the repair.
Right.
But I have other times where people have called me up and said, hey, this, I have my plumber come out, and he's told them right away it's a $6,000 job. And I'm like, what? So I bring my guy out that I know and trust, and he gets used in a lot of court cases because he is an expert, and he knows this. He knows the plumbing, the sewer lines of the city better than anybody I know. And so he looks right at it, and he goes, no. Let me show you. And we go and we look at it, and he goes, no, that right there, right where they were saying, they said this many feet out. Nope. You can look at it, and he'll zoom in with a better camera, better lens, better experience. Say, no, there's no issue. Now, they should have caught this one over here, and we go this way. And so, yeah, the key is having your great agent. He should have the vendors that are proven and trusted that we know we can count on them.
Well, Mark, thank you. I know you have an appointment to get to here in a little bit. We probably kept you back past your time. Thank you for joining us. We will be picking up where we left off on our next podcast. Can't wait to share the market information with you. We'll see you soon.
Thanks, Cory. Have a great day.